Welcome to the Life Puzzle Podcast. In today's episode, we're unpacking a question that is quietly haunting boardrooms, team huddles, and strategy sessions across the country, maybe even worldwide. What is it that we do when our old systems fail and no one is ready to step up? Because here's the thing, and our reality in leadership right now is that leadership pipelines are thinning out. Gen X is feeling really stuck. Succession plans, well, they exist, but only really on paper, not in practice. And when the markets shift, recruitment breaks, sales stall, everyone's looking around waiting for someone to take charge. If you're feeling that kind of tension, like you're carrying way too much, you're leading on empty, or still relying on the systems that were built for a world that doesn't really exist anymore, well, you're not alone. So today, we'll dive into why middle management is burning out, why recruitment needs a total reset, and how some of the smartest teams are rewriting the rules to thrive in uncertainty. This episode isn't just a conversation. It can be your new playbook for what to do when the old playbook stops working. So let's dive in.
So Chanel, I'm interested. We've been working with multi-generation leadership now for a little while. We've started to see some really interesting behaviours take place. So why are Gen Z leaders feeling so squeezed right now?
It's such an interesting question. As you know, and as you intimated there, we work multi-generational workplaces and we see the challenges of the different values, the different behaviours, the different mindsets, the way people have grown up throughout their careers really playing out in, departments and teams in terms of that lack of cohesion. And I think that what's really interesting at the moment is that there's such a distance, mostly because of technology, but we see such a distance between our Gen X leaders and our Gen Z leaders. There was such a change and a rapid transformation as far as technology was concerned. And so we're seeing that one of the frustrations of Gen X is that their messages just aren't cutting through to Gen Z. So what we see is that in some workplaces, we've got boomers that are still in the workplace. So they're struggling to let go and actually go into retirement. So Gen X is struggling to push some of the boomers out of the organizations so that they can get out of the way and start doing what they would like to do in terms of building, their legacy. Then we also have these Gen X leaders that are looking to who are their successors in Gen Z. And there's a disconnect or a gap between simple things like dialogues and being confident to have verbal conversations and conversations that don't involve a tech platform as a barrier. So we hear a lot of Gen Xers complaining about why Gen Zs are sending a Teams message or sending, a DM or texting or popping an email as opposed to picking up the phone and having a conversation, having quick dialogues, So one of the biggest challenges is bridging that gap between the belief systems associated with that. And they're expected to lead and manage change and prep the next generation. But a lot of what they're finding a lot of the time is, some of the soft skills and, the critical thinking and the problem solving skills that they see as second nature have just not been developed or practiced in Gen Z to the level that they would like to see. So they see that as little development and needing a lot of support in order to be able to bring them up to a level where they feel confident to be able to hand things over in that transformational leadership.
Yeah, so true. We see it all the time, and they end up just doing the task rather than being able to slow down to speed up and then wonder why they're working longer hours while everyone else is going home.
Absolutely. And I think that speaks a lot to the challenges that we have around the systems that are in place and how leadership was founded and built, say, 15, 20 years ago to what dynamics need to happen right now. And so would you say that the leadership crisis is more about the people or the system, Brad?
I think the crisis is about the system. We've sort of built rigid hierarchies and we don't really involve people. You think about some of the processes around a CRM now where, there's elements of data which is important, but so it gets to the point where people are so scared of making a mistake or doing it wrong that they just stop doing it. And because there's no development as them as a person, as a skill, they just get stuck on doing the checklist. They just get stuck on doing the SOPs. And if something doesn't fit in with that, then they don't know where to go. They're just lost. There's no critical thinking. They kind of just get sort of buried under the operations process, and having people to know beyond their task. We refer to the gets it, wants it, and can do it. They're doing a task, but do they understand what is the consequence if that task is not done to the standard?
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. And I think one of those key strategies around that is that people struggle to know what to do. I think people are coming along the journey where they absolutely know that there's a challenge and that there's a problem. But we've seen in our coaching sessions and in our facilitations that while many people acknowledge that there's a problem, they're sort of lost in terms of what's a strategy for trying to fix it. What insights do you have for people to share around that in terms of not really knowing where to start?
Oh, look, I think it's the first thing's having a conversation where explaining that a mistake is a mistake. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, all right? We'd say in NLP, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback, but so many people are caught up on the negative. Now, again, the hard question is how do you allow a team member to make a mistake without it being costly? And my question I ask every leader here is, can you tell me when they tell me about they're too busy answering questions, the team aren't doing their activity? Okay, so tell me what was your biggest monumental mistake you made in your career? And they go, oh, it was this one. It was huge. So you ever done it again? They go, no. It's another mistake you've done. Have you done
more
that again?
Importantly, will you ever forget it? I reckon.
Yeah. Will you forget it? Did you learn that lesson? Yeah. So what are you doing? You're actually preventing your team to have learning experiences and have the uncomfortable learning by protecting them and therefore making a rod for your own back. So I guess the first thing that they have them to do is be okay to create a space for them to make mistakes and learn, but just be able to know where are the boundaries where it's not too costly. I had one person explain what they were doing as a result of that lesson about I've got to make mistakes. Letting them go through the process all the way to about to press go and then say, now stop there. All right, so they've made the mistake, but it hasn't been costly because it hasn't been sent out. All right, and then gave them the feedback on that. And again, there's a lesson there. It would be good. It'd be a lot greater lesson if the person sent it out and saw the mistake and felt that uncomfortable feeling where the earth opens you up and swallows you because you've made that mistake, like the reply all to the entire business.
Yes, I think everybody's done that at one point in time in their career, and that cold sweat that you get when it's already been sent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you speak something really true here, and I want to bring up a conversation that we had with one of our clients recently in terms of making leadership a skill set, not a promotion. We've worked with several organizations of late, and there's been some mindsets around the fact that people are looking at leadership like it's a promotion or part of the ladder to climb in terms of the career pathways. And I think that you and I have a very different idea around that. Let's talk a little bit about how we think about that skill set.
Yeah, I think the trap that you'll fall into is you'll get someone who's really good at the doing. They got ownership. They turn up. They're really, really good. And you go, oh, that's great. I'll make you the manager. And you'll give them promotion. And they go, oh, this is fantastic. I get the corner office. I get to put my feet up on the desk. And then find out very, very quickly that the corner office is a corner office for a good reason. It's where everybody meets to ask you questions. And there's no feeding on the desk because everyone's constantly revolving door coming there asking you questions around that. So I think that the important thing for people to learn is that they need to understand that they have to build their skill set as a leader. You just don't get promoted and all of a sudden know how to do it. Okay. And probably my favorite example of this is explaining to people when they've got a new team member on board, and this is in an environment where there isn't a clear indication of succession, there isn't a clear process and planning. And they're talking about people that have been there for 6 months and they're not getting it, and they're not able to fill a leadership role in 18 months, 12 months. And I'm like going, well, think about this. A first-year apprentice carpenter can dig holes and swing a hammer and gets paid, I don't know what today's rate is, but probably $200, $220 a week, and not a full rate. But they're willing to dig holes and swing a hammer because they know in 4 years' time they're going to be a fully certified builder. And each step of that way is progression and development for them. And I think what happens is a lot of people miss out on actually taking their team on the journey, what needs to happen. So you start building your succession plan, you start building your leadership team from the moment they've got past their probationary period, and then they're showing that they've got it, giving them tasks, creating ownership. So it's not all of a sudden, well, hey, good job, you've been promoted to insert leader title here, away you go. They've already been doing the doing, and through that you've been able to measure their success, and they knew the pathway. So they've got ownership and turning up. And the last thing about this is they know what they're being measured against.
Yeah, it's so important in terms of measurement. And I just want to pick up on a couple of key things that you said there. think in trades and very technical kind of careers, it's very common for people to have a really clear pathway because they're being certified. They need to hit certain miles and measures and things like that. Whether we're talking about the hairdressing industry, whether we're talking about carpenters, whether we're talking about electricians, or even in IT services around being able to utilize tech and cybersecurity, etc. I think one of the key things around learning a trade or learning a set of skills that require certification is that people have a clear marked pathway, and often their experience level will change their reward level. Whereas I think in corporate environments, particularly in businesses that offer services that may not necessarily be as technical in their nature for delivery, we have a challenge in terms of deciding what is the pathway. And so therefore we're not measuring what does success look like. And to your point, a lot of the time people will promote based on, a person's ability to do the doing and, also on their attitude. Oh, look at that person. They're a go-getter. They work really hard. They deserve to be a manager. Just because they're really good at doing the thing doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make great managers and make great leaders. And then they're not measuring, as you said before, they don't actually have a succession plan to actually map what does the measurement of a great middle manager look like? How are we coaching them on soft skills and their ability to handle challenging conversations? What do they need to know about helping someone manage their time and all the demands?
Yeah. Or worse, they promote someone because they like them and they're a good bloke or a good girl.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And
I like this person. I want to look after them. They're going to be a good team player.
But, you open up, go on, sorry.
Yeah. So how do we actually rebuild leadership pipelines? Not just talking about them, but how do we actually do it?
Yeah, look, I think something that's really important about that is that when we don't actually have a mapped pathway, it sort of follows off what we were talking about before. There's no measurable succession plan in terms of outcomes. We're not coaching people. We're not looking at leadership as a skill set that people develop, much like what we were talking about with these apprenticeships in trade services. And so we make the assumption that, because somebody's good at a job, that they can ultimately be great at leading a bunch of people that do that job. And I think that also leads into, how are we hiring, how are we promoting, and what do our succession pathways look like?
Yeah, I think it's really good. And some things that conversations I've had out of leaders recent times is where they've had, they've done the recruiting process where they've probably really sort of not got what they wanted. And then they let that person who was not what they wanted stay in the role a little while. And then all of a sudden started seeing the effects of the people that they wanted to keep and enjoy that role, all of a sudden starting to rustle the feathers a little bit of this and all of a sudden lose 3 team members in a very short space of time. And I sat down and I said, okay, so what did you learn from that recruiting process? We probably shouldn't have hired the person we did. We probably should have let them go earlier. And I said, okay, good. And what are you going to do about fast tracking this now? Because you're going to come into a very busy period of time for your business. And you're now down 3 potential staff that would have been able to get you through that. And the person was sort of scrambling, looking at what I could do. And I just asked a few questions about some of the roles, knowing a little bit about their particular department. And very quickly, I could ask him questions and he could identify what was a point of reference of doing it good and how long you need to do it for and what was the thing. And before you know it, within about a 50-minute sort of coaching session, by the next call come round, he had a 12-week plan and leading in towards working on a 12-month plan. So when a new recruit comes on board, he's talking about where they're going to be in 12 months' time and what they need to do to get there. All right. And this is also timed in quite nicely with their pay reviews and things like that. So they're setting them up for success and creating that measurement. So the team member knows what the bar is to be able to go there from the get-go. So it's not just, I've been here for 12 months, can I have a pay rise? I've been here for 12 months, give me a title. It's mapped out to what that success looks like, and it's been clearly measured for both the leader and the team member. And as a result of that, you've got a real clear communication on where is the line of good and average and sometimes bad. But again, what are the activities you need to do to sort of show that up and how that can be related back into accountability, one-on-ones. This is what you want to do. This is your history. This is where you were. This is where your goal, where you want to go. What's in it for you?
And
I
that
think
clarity
that
gives
helps.
certainty as well to the individuals, because if people don't know what they're benchmarked against, it's really difficult to know, am I doing the right thing? I'm busy. Am I on track with what the expectations are of me? And so it's not just about measuring for the performance of the business. It's also about creating that sense of certainty and clarity for the individual, so that then if you do need to reset expectations or realign expectations, you actually have a benchmark.
Another example where I was talking to a leader and his absolute aha moment where he's like going, I've got two people that I'm building up as far as depth. I've got an operations person and this and doing this, and I need to spend time with them, but I can't take them off the pit to do training, because when I take them off the pit, the whole thing falls down. And I said to him, why are you taking your two leaders out of the pit to do training?
Why were they in the pit in the first place?
Yeah. Why are you doing that? And his realization was, oh my God, I should be working with the other team members one-on-one. I should be working with them to be able to train their team members one-on-one, as opposed to going through and doing that. And all of a sudden, the calendar opened up and it goes, okay, so you've just created 8 hours of extra time on your week. How are you going to deal with that now?
What will you do with all that extra time? Make sure that you spend it wisely.
So, Sean, tell me, what's really broken about recruitment today from what we've discovered and learnt?
Yeah, look, I think, in many cases, there are organizations that are talking about the war on talent and how there's not good talent out there. Some people are afraid about AI taking everybody's jobs. And so therefore, they're worried about their positions for people who are in organizations at the moment, which also, gets in the way of people being creative in their thinking and how do they become more efficient. But I also think that for a lot of organizations, they just are at a loss in terms of what to do to attract talent and to be able to speed up that process. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and HR were being absolutely, talk to about their lack of performance in having 10 vacancies in a particular area, and they just can't keep up with the demand to be able to screen, interview, etc. And so the biggest problem is that most organizations are hiring like it's still 2010. So, things like the way in which we post ads, the way in which we screen CVs, the way in which we interview, and this speaks to what you were talking about before. A lot of the time we've got people who are direct reports doing the interviewing and the screening without any proper screening skills or recruiting skills. And so they default to, oh, this person's nice. They've got a pulse. I think that we get along okay. Let's give them a go. And the challenge with that is that a lot of the time people are on their best behavior. It's a little bit like dating. People put on their best behavior for the first few months and then people get comfortable. And that's when you see who people really are. So
that's why you should have a probationary period in your dating cycle.
Yes, exactly. No, next. But in all seriousness, I think that what happens is that also the way that people look for jobs has changed as well. So it's not just how we're screening people and how we're recruiting and how we're attracting talent. It's also, it used to be in days gone by that, you as a candidate would put your best foot forward and make sure that you sold the person who was recruiting you on why you were the best selection in the candidate pool. What we're seeing now, and I have friends who work in graduate recruitment for, really big, top 4, top 5 firms, that we're seeing a struggle here now where, people are coming through their university degrees, people are coming into careers, applying for jobs, turning up for their interviews and expecting the company to sell them as to why should they choose that company as opposed to the hundreds of offers that they're getting because there is a talent shortage. Well, not a talent shortage. I think there's lots of people who are looking for roles. The question is the really good talent that fits your organization. How do we find and attract them, and how do we bring them into our organization and keep them? And so our old systems actually don't allow for how we're showcasing purpose. They don't allow for how we're showcasing flexibility, and they're not able to make fast decisions. I have seen people be recruiting for roles in 2 and 3 and 4 month cycles to fill one position. Now, that's just too long. Like if you've got a really great candidate that has applied for a role, if you don't call them that day, then probably they're going to be snapped up by your biggest competitor really fast.
Yeah, it's a sales process. So it's, again, right, it's exactly that same rules apply. If you get an inquiry, you don't follow it up straight away, you're probably going to lose it. So if you've got an ideal candidate, you're not following up straight away, they're an ideal candidate for good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And our response times aren't where they need to be, especially when we think about the need for instant gratification in today's society. Like, technology has brought us so many different things, and you and I talk about this often. Technology has brought us so many good things in terms of productivity, efficiency, being able to cut out, all of the grunt work in a lot of different things through automations or through repeatable processes. One of the challenges that it's brought for us is this need that people can plug something in and get an answer in, point whatever of a second, or get their questions answered without having to do any thinking themselves. And so that instant gratification process has actually changed the way in which candidates are looking for response times, and people lose interest really quickly if we're not getting back to them.
And we wonder why people and talent, aka HR, are having such a hard time trying to fix this.
Yeah, I think, it's actually, I feel for the HR and people and talent solutions, because they have demands that are coming down strategically. And this is why I love our multi-tiered immersive leadership program, because we're actually looking at being able to bring strategic objectives all the way through the business rather than people pointing fingers at different departments. I think there's a couple of different stages around this in terms of, many larger organizations will have, talent acquisition, people and culture division. They're looking at different ways that they as an organization can attract the talent that they want. But recruitment isn't necessarily a function that HR should be fulfilling. And certainly then the challenge exists that, well, if we don't have the recruitment skills within our departments, then how do we solve this conundrum of people hiring because they have good rapport with someone or maybe a wrong fit for the role? I think recruitment falls into some of that skill set that we were talking about as far as the leadership skills that people develop over time. You want to talk a little bit more about that? You were talking earlier about a client, but I reckon you've got another story.
I think it's a scenario where you go, I've got to do recruiting again. I've got to do the CVs, I've got to do that sort of stuff. And I've gone, I think probably the best way of dealing with it is just realize that recruiting is going to be part of your business as usual. You just need to be in that space where you're doing it, where you understand it's a process and you need to get better at it. But when you throw out in a job and you get 300 CVs or applications, that's a lot of work to be able to go through and deal with that. When you're going to have to do so many exactly screen calls to call people, then in the interviews, it's a lot of time to take up. And I think when you apply in the old way of just a needle in a haystack, if they pick up the phone, if they've got a CV that doesn't have any spelling mistakes, that doesn't been clearly written by chatbot GPT, then I'm halfway there. All right, if they turn up the interview and they've got clothes on, that's great. But again, we're still going through it the wrong way. We're not looking at the skill set that we need. So what do you think when we've got companies doing the same behavior and team members that haven't necessarily got the skill set to understand how to identify the right kind of behavior talents and things like that? Effectively, everyone's pulling their talent from the same pool. How would you do things differently? How could you possibly, given what we know about the human behavior and how people turn up and a lot of those hardwired behaviors, the question I've been asking when I've been working with them is, I want you to write a list of all the things you want in your ideal candidate. And they're going, what do you mean? I said, everything you want. Think about your two best team members and make a list of all the things you want in that ideal candidate. And they go, oh, that's really interesting. And then I want you to write a list of all the things that ideal candidate is looking for that's not in your job application. Not in your job description. All right, so how are you going to attract this wonderful person with this very drab job description?
And that's precisely right. Like, in advertising, when we talk about the correlations to sales and marketing and recruiting, in advertising, no one would ever write a really crappy commercial or an advert and expect that people would buy from that. And yet we write really crappy job ads. We have no idea around the talent that we're looking for, aside from the fact that they've got a pulse and that they seem like a decent human being and they've had some experience that kind of translates to what we're doing here. And so I think, my advice around that is actually looking at what are some of the key things that we need to do to map across the skills and talent that we're actually looking for. And much like niching, when we talk about in sales, the idea of niche, for our American listeners, or a niche, we tend to talk about how do you focus your attention on what it is that you want. And so, for this very reason, we've actually, developed a system where we're looking at how do we simplify that process so that we can actually attract the talent that we want, but also do so at speed to make sure that they fit the organization. And so from that perspective, I think we've got to stop looking at it as being a one and done thing. We've got to look at it from the holistic perspective and go, well, if I was marketing this organization, if I was marketing this role, if I step into the shoes of the candidate, what would make it exciting? Why would I want to be here? I've seen some really innovative examples in the marketplace around the way in which people, promote their culture. And I think we've got to break this cycle of, resume pushing, boring Seek ads, standard company statements that just talk about, mission and vision in the same way that, we did back in the 80s and the
Our
90s.
Company values. Lovely
Our
words
mission
on a wall.
is the generation of tomorrow in particular, much more discerning than, say, Gen X and even Gen Z were in terms of looking at what does their career progression look like? What's the pathway that they want to take themselves on? And so as we build depth in organizations, I think we have to be asking some better quality questions around who are the leaders of tomorrow and how do we get them motivated, excited, and upskilled with some of the soft skills and the human skills that they need to understand themselves and others.
I guess the magic wand here is imagine being able to get, your multi-tier leaderships, so your ELTs, emerging leaders, experienced leaders, and being able to have them have the skill set to be able to grow a team, and then being able to recruit their team that they want and having ownership on that, knowing the skill set. So if you were to reverse engineer the ideal team and come up with a solution, I'm wondering if anyone here would like that magic wand.
Well, I think that sounds pretty great. We can actually give you that magic wand, which is quite interesting. But I think in all seriousness, along those lines, we do need to have a look and say, what is it that we need to do in order to be able to begin with the end in mind? Because a lot of the time we're going through the motions, recruitment becomes, oh my God, we need somebody. And then it becomes, who do we promote in terms of the best that we've got internally? Maybe those people aren't the right fit. And more importantly, as part of our vision, with Team Puzzle and Work Puzzle, we see that there are a lot of people who are in jobs that are very unfulfilling, and unfortunately, that dilutes and destroys culture. Right?
Absolutely, and I think that being able to get in front of that and be a little bit different in your recruiting process and also your leadership process, laying out that plan and having someone who wants to do a job, absolutely fine. Someone who wants to be a career path and move up the ladder, here's a strategy. Makes all the difference of going through and doing that.
So as we wrap up today's conversation, we want to leave you with a few questions, the kind that don't just spark discussion, but actually really demand decisions. So here's your first one. If your top leader was to leave tomorrow, who in your team is ready to step up? Would you bet the business on them? And in most cases, people wouldn't. So that's a real problem. Leadership depth isn't actually built in crisis. It's built way before it.
How many roles have you tried to fill this year and how many have stuck? How many people are still there? Because recruitment isn't just filling the gaps. The real cost is in churn. And that points straight back at the culture and clarity. So how many people are here that started 6 months ago?
So if you know that you're in a situation where you want to really master and be innovative in your recruitment process to build tomorrow's leaders today, and you would like to get access to that magic wand we were talking about, then just click on the link below and book in a discovery with one of our team, where we can take you through the roadmap on how you can beat your competitors in the war for talent.